but use that opportunity to push Ikorodu traditional practices. And this was what characterized the colonial administration until they left in 1960. In 1960, a new challenge came upon the Ikorodu people, and this was the challenge of Christianity, but not Orthodox Christianity, Pentecostal Christianity. There are two major differences between Pentecostal Christianity and the Orthodox Christianity. The Orthodox Christianity at that time, they were a little bit rigid, a little bit flexible. Unlike the Pentecostal Christianity, when the Pentecostals came, they came with a firebrand gospel preaching methodology, especially the traditional African Christians. And all they did at this time was to go against everything traditional. Everything traditional. So at the same time again, who came to the rescue? At the same time, who came to the rescue of the traditionalists? It was also the intellectuals and the capitalists. Permit me to read an extract which the colonial officer wrote in 1930, which I got from the National Archive. It was written by E.J. Gibbons, the assistant district officer. He said, and I quote, "One of the most dangerous features of the condition of Ikorodu camp that we hope has now passed away was the manner in which young literates, possibly out of public spirit, surrounded the theologian, encouraging him in the most fantastic, pretentious way with a view to profiting from his patronage, but at the same time promoting the traditional religious practices in the council." What this is telling us is that even the colonial administrators acknowledges the fact that the Oloja of Ikorodu in the 1930s was surrounded by the intelligentsias. Now we move to in the 1970s. What were those things that happened in the 1970s? At this period, Lagos has become a state, and Lagos has moved into the hands of the indigenous, the natives. And because though Nigeria became independent, but Nigeria was still following to some extent the patterns and style of the practices of the colonial masters. But eventually, when Festac 77 was celebrated, that festival in 1977 further reinforces the activities of traditional religious practices, not just in Ikorodu as it were, but across Lagos, all over. From that moment, traditional religious practices has continued to be a center focus of Ikorodu community.
You have about just 3 more minutes.
From that moment, traditional religious practices continues to be the center focus of Ikorodu community. In conclusion, what this paper has done, or what this paper is doing, because it is a work in progress, is to understand the changing dynamics. Because there are a number of theories that have posited that when people are educated, when people are exposed, when people are knowledgeable, they tend to become less religious. And that is why you see that 80% of Nigerians, the moment they leave Nigeria and they find themselves in foreign land, especially in the West, they become more secular. Those who go to night vigil every now and then find to disconnect from practices, find to disconnect from Christianity, tend to disconnect from Islam. But that is not the case with traditional religion. As a matter of fact, recently, there is a resurgence, there is a revival, there is a return to traditional religious practices. So what this paper is trying to understand is why, what has changed over the years? Why are people in this age trying to embrace traditional religious practices? What are the reasons why, in spite of the spread of technology, in spite of the spread of modernity, in spite of the spread of civilization, traditional religious practices continue to find a voice amongst the community of religion? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kolawole Omutayo. Please let us confirm if Joseph Audu is back online and whether we have Muslim Okwande also online.
Joseph
Audu.
We only have one person online, and that is Gabriel Matthew.
Okay, I wouldn't know why we cannot have. We're supposed to have 2 more presentations online, but I think I should take the one the one I gave before we then have, if we have questions for the last presenter, let's just.
Sorry, how did I see the name?
I wouldn't know. I think Abdurrahman. I think that's all it's on the text.
Okay, so you are glad.
All right. Good morning, distinguished scholars here present. I remain Abdurrahman Akwaid Abiodun, and the topic before me is indigenous languages as conveyors of Nigeria's indigenous knowledge for sustainable national development and global competitiveness. There have been these discussions around colonization, recolonization, and how do we get our things, our own things on track in order to help ourselves and help the world. So when we look at the country, Nigeria is considered very endowed, large, dynamic human capacity, over 300 citizens, deposit natural resources, unique weather conditions, and more importantly, more than 400 indigenous languages. So all these advantages have positioned the country within the continental and global political and economic permutations in Africa. But if we look at being rich across all these levels of resources and the challenges we are facing, there is no consistency. So the question is, why do we have to grapple with poverty? Why do we have to grapple with corruption? Why do we have to grapple with poor education, poor health, terrorism, banditry, and all of that, when we are so rich and blessed with all these natural resources? And the questions are why and how do we address them? The next slide, Prof, please. The next one. Now, let me share an experience that I had sometimes in, I think, 2006. I was the secretary of the student union of my school, and we had this National Association of Students, Nigerian Students Convention in Agriculture. And you know, student politics, how it is. We were to elect the new national speaker. And after our deliberation, crisis erupted, and all these guys went into their cars, brought out guns, and they were shooting here and there. I had to take cover and hid myself somewhere. The person with whom I went to that convention with, rather than taking cover the way I did, was actually running towards where they were shooting. And I asked him, what are you to say? He said he saw a person trying to bring out a very big gun. So he wanted to go and see what he would do with the gun. I said, in this situation. And after the whole thing, nothing happened to him actually. I then asked him, what gave you that large act to go and do that? And he said, in their family, his father would always tell them that they have done certain things in them that no matter the sophistication of a gun, it can never enter their body. I was like, wow, this is wonderful. So this is why this paper is trying to see how indigenous languages could be leveraged to harvest the indigenous knowledge towards addressing some of the country's national challenges and make us stand a competitive chance globally. For instance, look at this, the kind of powers my friend had back then. If that powers were to be made available to our officers in the battlefield, to the extent that they can go and face the terrorists, the bandits, without the fear of being shot there, you can begin to understand how the country will fight insurgency and terrorism like that. Let's move on, please. Now, what do we mean by indigenous knowledge? They are described as the availability and application of tools, materials, guidelines that can be used to solve problems in order to enhance human capacity. And there are two types of this. We have the tangibles and we have the intangibles. While the tangibles might be those materials that people might know, the intangibles are the knowledge systems, the processes, how we do certain things, some of the deep aspects of our existence that we know can be used to solve some of our problems. Please, next slide. Now, look at this concentric circle. The core of every nation is indigenous knowledge. But what is covering that indigenous knowledge is the culture. The outermost that we can all see is the indigenous language. Now the trend is now backward. We've lost the indigenous languages to a very large extent in Nigeria. By that extension, we are losing our indigenous cultural system. And of course, we're automatically losing on our indigenous knowledge. So what we are trying to do here is, what can we then do to invigorate the use of indigenous languages within our society so that we can gain back our indigenous cultural system, and by extension, we can begin to harness the indigenous knowledge that are buried and covered by the culture. Let us go on. From literature, there are more than 27 languages in Nigeria alone that have gone into extinction. Now, we can begin to worry. If a language goes into extinction, it goes into extinction with all the knowledge systems that are buried within that language. Now, while I was doing this study, something shocked me. Look at Sambe language, spoken in Plateau State. As at 2005, only 2 elderly native speakers were alive. So from 2005 up to this time, only God knows whether those 2 will still be alive. And it means if they are no longer alive, the indigenous system and the languages have died with them. There is another one in Cross River State. They said the Faka language spoken in River State had about 200 native speakers as of 2001. If we still have some of them left, I'm sure probably none of them will have even be sharing that language with their own kids. So what can we do? Please, next slide. How can we, for how long are we going to allow ourselves to deprive ourselves of what we have and stop sourcing from outside? But people have queried, what are the empirical evidences to show that this indigenous knowledge system we're talking about are even potent? Now, we have seen the potency of this knowledge system across our health, medicine, and cultural and security. Let's take health, for instance. We are all familiar with some of the herbal traditional medicine that we use. Moringa leaf, bitter leaf, Shankapiedra, sage leaf. All of these things have been confirmed to be very, very good when it comes to treating certain ailments. Recently, I stumbled upon a video where a company abroad turned bitter leaf into blisters, such that they are now selling bitter leaf, what we all have at our backyards. They are selling it to us as drugs. But we are good to buy that, but we are afraid of using bitter leaf to solve our problems. Let's move on, please. In the area of agriculture, one of the keys, in fact, number 3 goal in the Sustainable Development Strategy of the UN is food security. And one of the ways to the sustainable development of any nation is to ensure food security. So how can we promote this using traditional farming techniques such as crop rotation, intercropping, agroforestry to enhance our soil fertility? If you look at there is a technique they call Tessa technique. It's an indigenous way of irrigation. Rather than spending so much money on the Western type of irrigation system, why can't we go back to our own Tessa technique? But the question is, how do people have access to a knowledge system with which they lack the language that the knowledge system is codified? There are natural pest controls that we can use as organic pesticide, which we have, rather than using all these chemicals that we all have around. And these have been used to be very potent. Next slide, please. Yes, in the area of security, Boko Haram members' activities, killed and adult napping. And while modern equipment are necessary, we're not saying we should not use modern equipment, but we are saying that they have those modern equipment. We have things that are indigenous to us that are very powerful. Why can't we get some of those modern equipment, merge it with ours to fight insecurity in our nation? If you look at the operational strategies of Oduduwa People's Congress, the Amotekun security forces in the southwestern part of Nigeria, all these are indications of the need for us to combine both modern and indigenous knowledge systems to combat terrorism. For instance, how many of our kids can relate with something like Daiko, Emu, Ayeta, Alubo, Okigbe, Apopo? All these things exist, and people have confirmed that they truly exist and they work. But if people have documented how to have access to these things in Yoruba, and your children are not speaking Yoruba. How would they access it, and how are they going to use it to solve their own problems? Please, next slide. There are indigenous language management system. There are water conservation. Please, next slide. All right. Renewable energy is another key area we should be looking, because the whole world is talking about global warming. And one of the aspects to reduce that is to ensure that we go into renewable energy. Now, look at the Fulanis. They use cow dung as cooking fuel. In some households, we use gas. Some use charcoal. Some use other things. Now, if we look at the large daily turnout of cow dung that we have and the environmental implication of gas and charcoal usage for cooking, we will all know that using cow dung might be very effective. What can we do towards ensuring that we look at the way of packaging the cow dung in a way that can be used as renewable energy to fuel all our cooking utensils, cooking, what is it called, that we use in our kitchen? So the concern again is, how can we access all these knowledge systems when we don't have the language? Immediately we lose the language, we lose the knowledge system. The next one, please. Now, if we know this, is it that the government has been silent, or they've been very irresponsible in addressing these challenges? Now, the latest edition of the National Language Policy provides that every child shall be taught in the mother tongue or language of the immediate environment for the first 4 years of basic education. Now, the question we've been asking is, to what extent is this practicable? One, if you look at the curriculum of those who attended NCE, students of education, first degree, even master's and PhD levels, I have never come across anything that says somebody that is to be a teacher will be taught across indigenous languages. So how do government expect you to use what you do not have? As a teacher, you are not taught in Yoruba. How are you supposed to teach in Yoruba with the student? Even if you are a Yoruba speaking person, you might be able to operate with Yoruba at the oral skills level, listening and speaking. But when it comes to reading and writing, definitely you have a lot to learn. So if government is saying learners should be taught in Yoruba, what provisions is government making available for teachers to really be equipped in using it? How many textbooks have we written in Yoruba? Is our chemistry textbooks written in Yoruba? So when we don't have all of this, it means it is just a mere lip service and no serious thing about it. The government again went further by launching National Language Policy in 2023. And of course, even going through that document, it's still not clear how the government intends to achieve the indigenous language entrenchment. So what can we do to ensure that we have our indigenous languages safeguarded and we keep our cultural system towards harnessing our indigenous knowledge systems? So we said we should have a well-crafted or a reworked and implemented national language policy. But the government cannot do this alone. They need the parent support. Many parents today would say, well, my children can speak English very well, but they struggle with Yoruba, and we are proud with that. Of what benefit is a child that can speak another person's language and cannot speak your own language? These are things parents need to do. If there is any private school that is teaching students or pupils in Yoruba, I'm sure many parents will withdraw their kids from such a school. So we need parent support in this regard. School support too is supposed to be sorted for them to implement the policy as it is. Today, you will go to schools, even government schools, you will see them, vernacular speaking is prohibited. The question I usually ask is, which one is vernacular? My own language is vernacular, when English language is something you expect. And if a child dares to speak the so-called vernacular, they are punished, they are fined. And we are saying, government is saying we should all be using the language in our schools. Then other stakeholder support should also be sorted. So the students across levels would be able to learn the indigenous languages very well. They will understand the functionality of indigenous knowledge buried in them and deploy same towards addressing many of the Nigerian national languages. One thing I have discovered is something happened in one of the eastern part of Africa. Some white men came to the particular village. They met with some locals and they saw a particular plant. And the locals told those white men that this particular plant can be used to cure kidney stone. Those white men took samples of those plants to their laboratory and they actually used it to cure somebody that was suffering with kidney stone. They now came back to the locals and asked them, yes, we've tested this thing, we know that it is working. But how did you know that this particular plant has this kind of efficacy? And the people told them that we communicate with the plant. There is a way we talk to the plant. The question is, if there is a child in that community that cannot speak the language of the locals, how can that child understand the language with which he can speak to the plant, let alone knowing what the plant can do and to solve the problem? And one thing we realize is this: if we have something that is truly ours and we are able to display to the world, not necessarily telling them how we came about it, but how it functions, they would come. And that is where global competitiveness comes in. If you are able to package what is truly yours and you market it well, these people would come and it will be a source of income for the country and individuals that are in the country. And of course, that's why I said this will be without prejudice to the blended role of English language. We're not saying we should discard English. It is here and we have to use it. But how to use it is what we have to define. We can use it to market these things. We can use it to project what we truly have or what truly belongs to us. So, by conclusion, government needs to be intentional about proper entrenchment of Nigeria's indigenous languages within the educational framework. Enlightenment campaign needs to be embarked upon to make citizens, especially parents, appreciate the use of indigenous languages at home. And a good framework should be put in place to ensure proper implementation of the indigenous language policies in Nigerian schools. Thank you very much for your time. So, unfortunately, we don't have the remaining presenters. Please check if they are online. We're still supposed to take 2 more.
No, I only have Gabriel Matthew online.
Just Gabriel.
Others are not there.
All right. From the presentations that we've had, if we have questions, you can ask our questions. Yes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Please, let's go in that order. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Bayo Veteran from Madeleine Federal University of Education. Maybe question or comments, I don't know what to do. But then the second presenter presented on the issue of person giving back to the community. I think that the issue of entitlement mentality, which is common. My father sponsored me to the university, and so we must return that gesture back. For me, I think that is a way of in Yoruba language we say father. I don't know. So how are we going to marry these 2 points? This entitlement mentality and the issue of being a person, the issue of being a person in the African society. Then the third presenter presented on these change practices, change in traditional religious practices in the Korodu division. I'm also wondering if you say that these people are still continuing in their traditional practices, which is very good. People are returning to this traditional religious practice. I'm just wondering that. Are you saying there is no change at all in this, how they celebrate their Oro? Because I know Ikorodu is very peculiar to this Oro issue. When there is Oro in Ikorodu, it's a big trouble. People don't go out, they are not doing it. So I'm just wondering if it's still the same as the practices in the whole time. Even up to now, no change. I'm saying that there are no changes at all in their religious practices. Then, number 2. How do we want to go about this managing conflicts? Because if Oro falls from Friday, that the Muslims are supposed to go to the mosque, and if it also falls on Sunday, that the Christians are supposed to go to the church, and with this issue of this Pentecostal people that you mentioned the other time, I know they won't take it lightly. They will start quarreling. So how are we going to manage this conflict if at all they come up? Thank you very much.
The next person, yes.
Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. So I just want to respond to the the last presenter. So your presentation was wonderful. So I just wanted to ask what is the impact of the Western reaction and criminalization, and then religion, agenda of religion, on indigenous language and knowledge. So I was expecting that we just acknowledge the fact that this also about huge impacts on indigenous knowledge. And in fact, the primary causes of extinction of academic well, it came in the first instance, and then people have been accustomed to, I mean, religion. So all those are Western medicine we're talking about. So what is the role of religious belief, individual religious belief? Some cases whereby people they took Christianity, they took Islam, and deliberately what they have, what their forefathers have left to them, so they threw them in. You understand? So those things are very important. So what is the impact of this? So and then of course you talked about way forward. So I also was expecting that talk about decriminalization. So the best way forward, one of the best ways forward is just to have a colonial mindset, where Africa with consuming Western products, where the World Bank, for instance, is at the end of affairs, they are the one that will certify which medicine and kind of breakthrough from every country's good. So they are the one keeping, they are the one setting standard for every other nation. It's not as if we don't have things that are potent in Africa, but they will be the one to set the standard for what they don't even have knowledge about. So you understand, just for that, that's just an example. So we have to decolonize, to have a decolonial mindset. Thank you.
Thank you. Number 3.
All right, thank you. I will start on the last speaker. I will comment on three speakers. Let's start on the last one. I don't know your question. So I don't know the presentations. The first thing I want to talk about is at some point in your presentation, you sounded as if you were presenting a contrast between indigenous knowledge and modern knowledge system. What I'm just going to encourage is that we should begin to explore the possibility of what we can call the indigenous modern knowledge system. And the reason why I'm saying is that when we talk about transforming epistemologies to basics in terms of driving development, there is no society in the world that relies on static knowledge. So, as much as we want to continue to benefit from our indigenous knowledge system, we must also think about how we can continue to modernize and improve those systems. And we have examples, China, Japan, and all of that. You see them, you see elements of the tradition in the knowledge system, but you also see the modernity in it. If the forefathers will come back today, they will see a vast difference, a vast improvement on what they left and what their offspring are doing now. But I think that we are not trying to modernize enough that. The second thing is, yes, we are very correct that we have about 400 languages. So in practical terms, when you want to find solutions with all the problems that we have in Nigeria, do you think we have capacity to propose 400 languages?
Over 400.
Over 400. So if we cannot do it, should we be prioritizing some languages over them? How do we do it? That's all. So the presenter on the program, again, a very good one. I'll just try to make some input that relate to what I know that some factual inconsistency. I will also stand to be corrected if I'm wrong. I think that it does not restrict everyone during the festival. It affects females mostly. So like the one they teach during the that was June 12, and then they had one on May 27. And I will come back to that very quickly. The second thing I want to talk about again is that Ikorodu was not part of Ijebu. Ikorodu was always part of Remo. It's very easy for people to conflict Remo and Ijebu, because at some point when the colonialists came, they now said that we cannot be replicating all this everywhere. Man, this Ijebu and Remo together, and they created the Remo division, which is what many of us talk about. But Remo is different from Ijebu. And it was the Akariku, like you rightly mentioned, Akariku of Remoda that gave a part of Shagamu land to the colonial masters to expand Lagos. The last point that I will also make is that, like I said, there was Solo Festival in Kurudu on May 27. It fell on Children's Day. A whole lot of people were not happy. There were complaints all over, and they were in the intelligentsia in Kurudu complaint. When the second leg of that whole festival was going to happen, it fell on Tuesday, again, another public holiday. And the Nigerian Bar Association, Ikurudu chapter, which I think will fall within the class of intelligentsia that you are referring to, objected, actually wrote a letter. If I find that letter, I will send it to you. I know you can also find it online. And complained to the king that they do not expect that this will continue going forward. That in 2025, there should be modern ways of doing this. So, yes, they are supporting the tradition, but they are also revolting against certain practices that they feel impede on what a modern society should do like. So, to again, a very good presentation. I would like that you focus on, I like the way you concluded, because when we focus on the notion of personhood in Africa, this communal sense of becoming a person and all of that, the problem has been that it is ableist in nature. So if you are an imbecile, you do not have the capacity to contribute to the good society, you cannot attain personhood because you do not really have much to contribute. And that limits your capacity to attain personhood. And it's one of the bane of our society today. Because somebody goes abroad, you don't even know whether he's journeying there. Because he's sending money home to fix borehole that going to be fixed, as I rightly said. He becomes a person in your need until you get caught. Like that over, which is a little sentence now. So, and then you now lose your person when your community now finds out that you've been doing drugs in the United States or stealing COVID money to come and boast and offense on the platform. So there is a need for us to redefine what person entails. And it should no longer be transactional because it's part of the moral identity that we have in contemporary society today. And it's only those who are able to throw money around that we feel can attain a person. Thank you.
Next question. That's four.
Thank you. I'm Seriki Kazim from Naruki Akintola University of Technology, Ogbomosho, Nigeria. My first question goes to the presenter on Africa and the decolonization of oil governance.
Mr. Gabriel, is it still online?
Are you online, Mr. Gabriel?
No.
Oh, okay. So let me take other ones. Okay. To the presenter on the intelligentsia, capitalist, and change in traditional practices of ecology. That's Dr. Charles, right? You established in your findings that the educated parvenus played integral role in the promotion or the elevation of traditional practices in ecology during colonial period. Your assertion has not been able to establish the specific contributions of such educated parvenus to the promotion of traditional practices. But when you talk about traditional practices, it is a robust concept that encapsulates so many components. So what aspect of it are you talking about? Is it religion? Is it, is it festivals? Is it, are we together now? So you need to be specific about that. Then to the presenter on, that's our chair, the chair. You talked about indigenous language being the vehicle for the sustenance of indigenous knowledge system. I would appreciate it if your paper can help establish the intercourse between certain exogenous forces, and in this case, the forces of religion, external religion. Now, external religion. I know that in Islam, someone told me for instance, that if you read the Yoruba version or the Yoruba translation of the Islamic scripture, which is the Quran, you are only reading for, for exercise or to gain knowledge. You are not reading the Quran itself. Are you getting my point now? So what I'm saying in essence is that Islamic ideology, that reading translated Quran, a Quran that has been translated into Yoruba language, is not the same thing as reading the Quran itself. You are not going to have the scriptural benefits attached to reading Quran if you read the Yoruba version. How do you think that impedes, indigenous, languages? These are these, the indigenous knowledge system. So, we can respond to those ones.
All right, the next question.
I must commend the censors for a wonderful sensation. And my question is to Dr. I'm asking this question based on my own personal experience. As a parent, I have a daughter now, which is almost 8 years. And when we are talking about indigenous languages, she will say, "Okay, I'm not interested in that." Even if she has a Yoruba exams to speak, she said, "I can take Yoruba exams, I'm not pass it." And I'm like, okay, how can educators or teachers make the teaching of these indigenous languages more engaging and practical for pupils? Indigenous language learning starts from basic, basic level. So how do we make this language more engaging and practical so that these children will find it's not just interesting, but they'll also be able to be proud of these languages? And also, how can we make sure they are also learning English in order to succeed in today's competitive world?
Then the next, yes, sir.
All right, good evening, everyone. My question goes before the next talk about the produce of colonial class. Really like this. First, I'll thank you for your storytelling techniques. So I got this. It's nothing more interesting in the presentation. Talking about the international system and the today's Christianity or Islamic religion, has there in any way whereby there was a clash of interest, not beyond this paper, they have to come and face each other? And in your presentation, you spoke more about the events affecting of these things. Has there been time by African each other, religious in Nigeria, that's one? You spoke about the traditions or their rights of ceremony coming up at important time. I realized that it's not 2 years ago, there was a first dose and all that came up during election. As they use their own for political achievement also to settle score between their own lovers and other party. As there be issue like that, then to also talk about indigenous practices. You just score between candidates. What is about indigenous practices? It's just trade that interests me, and as a friend also, I also take the question how it can be done. You spoke about how about the view that we passed about students who have used languages in our schools. I guess maybe in last school or even that for it to be state from last school, I think 3 or 3 that's the past thing that course is compulsory. So I have my own solution for it, because one, it should not be a compulsory course. Even in Western culture, if you are to go to that study, it's a year course. So you can't imagine me using
three months to learn the basic course, like that. You saw it for person like German, you know how difficult it is to learn original lecture. Talking about personal of knowledge, has there been cases of insecurity of this thing being passed from generation and they need for something else? For instance, now, talk about to today, when they belong in all these schools, people fight between different schools. And you see boys, girls come out, it's their teachers who beats them in school. You think this can be sustainable? Does it make sense to passing all these characters to the upcoming generation to have a safe society? Thank you.
Thank you. The last question I would.
I would just like to begin to clarify this. Well, you made a statement I want to clarify whether it's based on reviewing there's any people that show that those who live in Nigeria actually abandon Nigeria. Then people can do study around that. Or just based on the assumption that because some people are just online abroad, even when you're in Nigeria, perhaps you not practice anything. Just instead of chatting abroad, just for them to just create content. When of these people don't know anything about the know they are not creating. Just are really for them to create content. Is that people study around that? That's the first question. And sir, it's a great idea to promote indigenous knowledge, but I don't know. I would like to clarify whether you actually studying a particular language and you saw the documentation around how this indigenous language was used to preserve indigenous language.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. We have just about 12 to 13 minutes left, so we want to find a way of making use of that. What that means is the conversation will continue even after the timeout, but for the sake of the time available, we're going to distribute that among those who are here. So I would like maybe you should go first, then you go next. 4 minutes, 4 minutes, 4 minutes, then you respond to the questions as succinct as you can.
Okay, thank you everyone for the contributions. The question before me is how can we marry the entitlement mentality? Because that's the question. Why we know that Africa is a communitarian society. There is no place we cannot do with giving. We cannot do based on without giving. So we cannot do without giving. When it comes to Africa, we are not individualistic to certain extent. So we need to give back. However, when it comes to entitlement mentality, we must understand that it is the duty of the person giving to differentiate and to discern where the entitlement mentality comes from. When someone is saying, you are not the person just because I failed to give him something that if I give you will inconvenience me, then there's nothing bad in that. I won't give you. That's not the truth. Since I don't have it, I'm sorry. No, let's come in. We know it's transactional, right? We know it's transactional. Yes. But the truth is that I should not give you at the end of what? Doing myself, wanting myself. So at that time, if you are saying I don't want to, I know the reason behind it. The truth is that we all know the reason behind it. So let us be fair with ourselves. So when it comes to that extent, let us be able to differentiate. Let's discern the issue and we move on.
All right, sir.
Oh, okay. Let me start by expressing appreciation for the responses. I want to start from my brother beside me there. Yes, there are a lot of empirical evidences. There are international reports, there are religious reports. In fact, there's one I just looked now. Nigerians in Britain becoming less religious. It is not about online posts or anything. It's a reality that is happening. You understand? If you want more, you can just Google it. My brother from the other side, I want to also thank you for your insightful comments, but I want to ask just 2 questions. Now, the first question, when the Nigerian Bar Association brought out that letter, was the Oro eventually celebrated?
Oh, yes.
Good. Now, that is the point I'm trying to emphasize. Every now and then, people always complain, you understand, about people always complain, but the Oro will still take place. You understand? People will protest Organizations will write letter, government will pass injunctions, but the oral will still take place, and it has always been like that. Now, to also buttress one or two things, when we talk about Ikorodu, Ikorodu is not just one street. Ikorodu is not just one quarter. Ikorodu has 15 quarters, and the oral does not take all part of the quarters. So there are certain streets and certain areas where this oral usually takes place. So other people in other parts of the town can go along with their normal business. But in the core of the town, you will not go out. That is it. Number three, we talked about Ijebu and Remo. Me and you know that Ijebu and Remo are symbiotic. We may not be able to divorce Ijebu, and that was why I eventually emphasized that Ikorodu gained, or the British took Ikorodu, ceded, Akaribo of Remo ceded Ikorodu to the British. You understand? Ikorodu is predominantly from the Remo stock, but to some extent, they are also seen as Ijebus. You asked the question if there has been change. Yes, you understand. As a matter of fact, my paper, I have a paper that is about change, adaptation, and continuity, which means that there are some changes. The traditional religious practices adapted and continue in other places. So it is not as if it has continued to be static. There are modernization, there are adaptations, there are certain things. Your question is also similar with that of my brother there. You asked if there have been conflicts, tensions. There are lots. There are a lot of frictions, there are a lot of tensions, there are a lot of court cases. But at the end of the day, the traditional religious practices has found a way to be resilient. Then we also, somebody asked a question about using Oru as a political agenda. Yes, I can confirm that. And it is not just starting now. It has always been part and part of the system, even in the colonial era. When the traditionalists do not like a particular candidate that has been selected for kingship, they'll bring out the Oru. It has always been like that. And when we talk about traditional religious practices, maybe because I only used the Oru as an example, there are a number of practices. It is not just about the Oru. There are more than 50 practices. Well, I only use the Oru because the Oru is one of the most popular. In Ikorodu today, there is a woman, there is a river known as Ota, that people go there to go and fetch water. And there are certain religious practices. Ikorodu has close to 25 religious practices or festivals from January to December. You understand? But the ones we know are the ones that the media usually promoted. Above all, I want to thank you for your comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let me start my response from the last questioner, which focused on whether there has been documents that show that indigenous knowledge systems are codified in our indigenous language. Of course, you see, when we look at different languages, if you have that I did. No, my concern is to encourage the use of indigenous languages. That when we encourage the use of indigenous languages, by extension, we have access to the culture again. And by the time we are now into the culture, somehow we have access to the indigenous knowledge. Don't forget that even the core practitioners of this indigenous knowledge system are somehow secretive. It's not something you can just access. But many people do not have access to it because they've lost the culture. The Yoruba has an adage, sorry to the non-Yoruba speakers. Now, if you have lost the practice of how to mowawe, you might not actually have, which is within our culture, you might not have access to the knowledge, but you can't even understand the culture if you have lost the language. That is where we are coming from. So my sister who asked about the children not even having the interest, I think it borders on the parents.
Yes.
Every child, every normal child has capacity to acquire any language between 0 years and 3 years. In fact, universal linguistics understands that for every child, after 3 years, you're going to begin to learn a new language. But whatever you are able to acquire between 0 and 3 stays with you. So, but what are parents doing? Are we really using the language at home?
Are we encouraging our kids to really use this language? And the schools we enroll our kids, when you try to find out from them whether they offer Yoruba language, did you take your child away from such a school? And even if the schools try to incorporate Yoruba into their curriculum, and probably you just go to the school and you find your child being taught in Yoruba in a classroom, what would be your reaction? So basically, the thing is from the home, it is the parent. Whatever interest a child develops is going to be premised on the foundation that has been laid from the home. And I think we have a lot to do in that regard. Then my brother asked about if this knowledge system begins well established and the children go to school and they have all these and even among themselves and the teachers, they begin to test some of these things on the teacher. Yes, in fact, these are things we've seen before. But like I said, my interest is not actually on the use of that knowledge yet. Let us first of all get the language right. We can't talk, it is not everybody that have access to what you were saying. In fact, some people will still say those things do not exist, despite the fact that we have seen situations that those knowledge systems have been actually been played out. But the starting point is the language. How many of us within our different cartoons use indigenous, even those of us who are here, can we really write in Yoruba? Can we really read in Yoruba? Anytime I strive to speak in Yoruba, anytime I do that, I have a friend who is a doctor of philosophy in Yoruba. He will tell me what you are saying is wrong. That is how we say it. But when you go and see where documents that have actually been packaged to house some of these indigenous knowledge systems, they are written in core Yoruba, such that if you don't even know the core, you might not even get information from whatever material you're doing. So I think the starting where is a gradual process. We'll get to that point, and when we get there, we'll know how to manage it. Then the issue of religion. Yes, religion will always have to, and that is why we said there has to be campaigns, reorientation, decolonization of our mindset. I don't think, I stand to be corrected, but I don't think there is any portion of the Quran that tells us not to use saint leaf to cure ourselves, that tells us not to use ewuro to cure ourselves. And that takes me to the issue of modernity that my brother talked about. What stops us as a nation to say, okay, if we have found out that Enyolobe is very effective, that is Chanka Piedra, we have found out that Efirin is very effective, what are our medical practitioners and those that are practicing the orthodox medicinal pharmacists in the orthodox manner, what can we do to put them together and see how we can convert some of these things into blisters? If I walk into any pharmacy and they are giving me Efirin, I just said a foreign company launched Ewuro in blisters. So if we are ready to take that from them, what stops us from taking it by ourselves too? And that is where we are coming from. The aspect of even in the work front, that okay, if we convert whatever that has translated into Ayeta, into blister, and we give to our soldiers to use as statement, we may not necessarily tell them what it does. It will just be part of their training. We can do that. I'm aware, I have a friend who did his postgraduate studies in Saudi Arabia in criminology. And he said in Saudi Arabia, they do buy all their armament from the United States of America. But for whatever weapon they buy from America, they have a team of scientists. He said his own supervisor is one of them, and whatever they are to do, he will put his own people together to work on it. That if a particular firearm is to travel 1,000 kilometers, the Saudi authority will then ask them to rework it to travel 3,000 kilometers, believing that US will have thought what they have is something that can travel 1,000 kilometers, not knowing that they have reworked it to travel 3,000 kilometers. That's the kind of thing we are talking about. If OPC person can throw an egg into someone's house, and the house will catch fire, then what can we do to use it as a bomb? Find a way of refining that, such that when we throw it at terrorists in the Sambisa forest, the thing will catch fire.
But the thing is embedded in our spirituality.
That is what
you can't get it.
Now the point is, let us begin to use the language first. You see, there are certain things. If you go to greet an elder, and that is one thing we've lost. If you go to greet an elder today, say, good afternoon, sir, we raise our hand. Back then, if you want to greet an elderly person, there is a way you greet them. There are things they will, even if you move close to any of them, there are litmus tests they will do to you to ensure that you are really well cultured, well mannered. And when they have established that, they will get you into doing. At times, you do some things to these elderly, they will say, "Ah, come, they can share Louis." And they will do some things for you that you will be later. You will be asking, "Baba, what did you give me yesterday?" Don't worry. When it is time for you to use it, it will tell you how to use it. These are things we've seen that played out. So I think we need to only reorient ourselves and find a way of recolonize our minds to appreciate what is truly ours and be bold enough to showcase it to the world, because definitely they have solutions. I mean, we have solutions to some of the national problems and the world problems. I'm not sure there is any question I have not addressed. And by that, we have come. All right. Yes, we have, in fact, we have 520 languages according to Ubuntu 2015. And some people are even arguing that we have quite more than that. So now, the question is this: how do we harmonize all of these languages? I have thrown that two factors or two forces can come to play: the government and the academia. But we have seen over the years that our governments are not responsible, so to speak. Whatever that will not benefit them directly, they might not really function with it. But what are academics doing? Academics they are the GAM, and they are supposed to meet with the town. And what are we then doing in the academics to meet up with the town by solving a social problem? The best way I feel, there is no point one person will have to go through a PhD process, and all that we have is a PhD thesis that will not leave the shelf of the supervisor. What can we do to say, okay, education technologists, curriculum developers, language experts, let us see how we can put all these languages together using the power of technology to see if I'm talking. Let's give this example. If we have seen the UN assembly, somebody speaking Chinese, another person speaking Japanese, with different languages, but they give them gadgets to interpret what is being said in English into their own language.
Sure. I'm just sorry, we don't have the next session, and we really have to take a break in order to set up the system for the next session.
Like I said, the conversation continues. Thank you very much. We want to appreciate everyone for your time and your contributions. Yes, we continue these conversations and